Yeah. Where are they at? They're in the kitchen, I think.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this brand new podcast called Conservative Principles with Scott and Sophia. So I'm Scott, and this is my partner here, Sophia. How you doing, Sophia? How's it going tonight? Let me just unmute you here.
Can't complain.
There we go. How's it going tonight? Uh-oh. Man, this mic keeps getting muted. Okay, how you doing? You were muted out.
I'm doing. I'm doing
Good.
good.
Good. So tonight we're going to kind of like just explore, conservative principles. And we're going to be doing this regularly. And today we're going to be talking about an author, a scholar. His name is Thomas Sowell, and some people are familiar with him. I'm not so familiar with who Thomas Sowell is. Do you know much about who he is, Sophia?
I know he's a conservative. I know that,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I don't know that much about him yet.
Well, I've been hearing a lot about Thomas Sowell. Like a lot of people tell me that he's actually a black conservative.
Yeah, he's
Um,
black.
yeah, and that he's actually fighting racism, but not in the same way that people traditionally have talked about fighting racism, like through government programs or through some sort of active, you know, what's the word, like some sort of you know, government actions or policies. He's mainly looking at racism from a cultural standpoint, from what I understand. So I just want to understand what he means by that. Like, how would culture play a role in the racism that, especially, with African Americans and white people, you know, historically here in the States? How does culture play a role? I'm just really interested to kind of start off. So there's a few videos. Apparently this guy's
Well,
got
the way
like
the
tons of
way that
books
the
and
way,
stuff. Hmm.
sorry to interrupt. Um,
Hmm.
the way that I think that he means that is that what we consider black culture a lot of
Hmm.
times is it's like a setback to us because let's some of the things that we do in this culture is what's holding us back, and I think that's where he's coming from.
Mm.
That's what I think.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, he's got, like I said, he's got tons of books, tons of videos, and we'll explore all of that as we do different episodes and stuff like that. But let's get right into it, man. Let's not waste any time. I'm going to go ahead and add the video to the screen here, and we're going to check it out, and we'll discover what the heck is he talking about.
These people are creating a terrible problem in our cities. They can't or won't hold a job, they flout the law constantly and neglect their children, they drink too much, and their moral standards would shame an alley cat. For some reason or other, they absolutely refuse to accommodate themselves to any kind of decent, civilized life. This was said in 1956 in Indianapolis, not about blacks or other minorities, but about poor whites from the South. Nor was Indianapolis unique in this respect. A 1951 survey in Detroit found that white Southerners living there were considered undesirable by 21% of those surveyed, compared to 13% who ranked blacks the same way.
Mm. So what do you think about that? He's saying basically that, some of the
So when he
same
first started
things.
talk, when he
Hmm.
first started talking, I definitely thought he was talking about black people. That's the first thing.
Hmm.
But then
Yeah.
when I saw the picture,
Hmm.
I was like, wow, that's he wasn't talking about black people.
Yeah, that's interesting. So he's saying that they were talking about actually white Southerners. So that's kind of weird. It's like usually these things are ascribed to Black Americans, right? So it's kind of weird that he would
Right.
actually point that out.
Sound like he was talking about the hood.
That's right. So I don't know, man. Let's hear what else he has to say. Let's check it out.
In the late 1940s, a Chicago employer said frankly, "I told the guard at the plant gate to tell the hillbillies that there were no openings." When poor whites from the South moved into northern cities to work in war plants during the Second World War, occasionally a white Southerner would find that a flat or a furnished room had just been rented when the landlord heard his Southern accent.
Mm,
More is involved here than a mere parallel between blacks and Southern whites. What is involved is a common subculture that goes back for centuries, which has encompassed everything from ways of talking to attitudes toward education, violence, and sex, and which originated not in the South, but in those parts of the British Isles from which white Southerners came. That culture long ago died out where it originated in Britain, while surviving in the American South.
Sophia, you
Oh,
you
okay.
came from Europe. Do you, is this something that they taught you guys at all? Like, is this something that you're aware of at all?
Not at all. And now I'm kind of seeing what he's doing. He's actually comparing, like making a comparison and where that culture came from. That it's actually a subculture. No, I've never learned that before, ever.
Mm,
And I'm from Germany, so I never heard of that.
right, right. And I'm from the South, and so I know that there are groups of Southerners still um, that talk very broken English, that talk a different kind of dialect than say people in the North, or even people out west in California, or even other people here in the South. Not everybody talks like that. So it definitely sounds kind of like a subculture, but it sounds
Is he
like what
talking
he's
about like are you talking about like ebonics or like how like country folks talk or what exactly like
yeah, country folks. I was raised around some country folks, and they talk very very fast, and they kind of sing their words like like they talk like
or
that, like
with
up and
that
down,
slang?
up and down. hmm It's kind of like a slang, a southern slang sort of language. Very, I guess, very similar to Ebonics, but African Americans, um, you know, like say the word like is like he is doing this, I is doing that. It's kind of like broken traditional English, and it's called Ebonics. There's like this typical um Southern black speaking.
Right, right. I know
And
that.
that's mainly with Black Americans that I see. But I think what he's saying here is that even that sort of dialect may have come from what he's saying in England, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He said he said from England.
Okay. Well,
The British.
the British,
A,
right,
a
right.
British subculture.
Okay. Let's check it out.
Then it largely died out among both white and black Southerners, while still surviving today in the poorest and worst of the urban black ghettos. It is not uncommon for a culture to survive longer where it is transplanted and to retain characteristics lost in its place of origin. The French spoken in Quebec and the Spanish spoken in Mexico contain words and phrases that have long since become archaic in France and Spain. Regional German dialects persisted among Germans living in the United States after those dialects had begun to die out in Germany itself. A scholar specializing in the history of the South has likewise noted among white Southerners archaic word forms, while another scholar has pointed out the continued use in that region of terms that were familiar at the time of the first Queen Elizabeth. The card game whist is today played almost exclusively by blacks, especially low-income blacks, though in the 18th century it was played by the British upper classes and has since then evolved into bridge. The history of the evolution of this game is indicative of a much broader pattern of cultural evolution in much more weighty things.
So bridge, I'm familiar with that. I'm not so familiar with whist though. Do you know what that is? Hmm.
Nope. Sorry.
Yeah, but I know bridge. Like I think even my grandparents played bridge all the time. Like you go over to
I've
their
heard
house and
that.
it'd be.
I've heard that. I have no
Mhm.
idea how to play it though. I have no clue.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting though. So that's kind of where that game come from. So
But he's
okay.
basically saying that even though that culture died out over there, it still remained here
Hmm.
with black people. That's what he's saying, right?
Right. So it's kind of like it's inherited. Like culture is sort of like inherited, like a trait that you would pick
Right.
up
But I'm
on
saying
and.
I don't think
Hmm.
it's well, is inherited the right word? I think he's
I don't
saying
know.
that they were exposed to that over here
Hmm.
and then they stuck with it. And over there it kind of died out.
Mm. Right, 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 right. So they took it and ran with it. Okay. Okay, that makes sense though. All right, let's check this out.
Southern whites not only spoke the English language in very different ways from whites in other regions, their churches, their roads, their homes, their music, their education, their food, and their sex lives were all sharply different from those of other whites. The history of this redneck or cracker culture is more than a curiosity. It has contemporary significance because of its influence on the economic and social evolution of vast numbers of people, millions of blacks and whites, and its continuing influence on the lives and deaths of a residual population in America's black ghettos, which has still not completely escaped from that culture. From early in American history, foreign visitors and domestic travelers alike were struck by cultural contrasts between the white population of the South and that of the rest of the country in general, and of New England in particular. In the early 19th century, Alexis de Tocqueville contrasted white Southerners with white Northerners in his classic Democracy in America, and Frederick Law Olmsted did the same later in his books about his travels through the antebellum South, notably Cotton Kingdom. In colonial America, the people of the English borderlands and of the Celtic fringe were seen by contemporaries as culturally quite distinct and were socially unwelcome. Mob action prevented a shipload of Ulster Scots from landing in Boston in 1719, and the Quaker leaders of eastern Pennsylvania encouraged Ulster Scots to settle out in western Pennsylvania, where they acted as a buffer to the Indians, as well as being a constant source of friction and conflict with the Indians. It was not just in the North that crackers and rednecks were considered to be undesirables. Southern plantation owners with poor whites living on adjoining land would often offer to buy their land for more than it was worth in order to be rid of such neighbors. The cultural values and social patterns prevalent among Southern whites included an aversion to work, proneness to violence, neglect of education, sexual promiscuity, improvidence, drunkenness, lack of entrepreneurship, reckless searches for excitement, lively music and dance, and a style of religious oratory marked by strident rhetoric, unbridled emotions, and flamboyant imagery.
Praise the Lord. So
Dang, they were not liked at all by other whites.
yeah, and again, if you would have not heard what he was talking about before, you would think he was talking about again the hood and like black
Yep,
Americans in the
absolutely.
ghettos, you know.
Straight up.
Yeah, that's
Yep,
really interesting.
absolutely.
That's interesting, man.
Lack of education, can't hold down a job,
Hmm.
drinking, purity. I mean, that sounds like the hood.
Yeah, yeah.
This oratorical style carried over into the political oratory of the region in both the Jim Crow era and the Civil Rights era, and has continued on into our own times among black politicians, preachers, and activists. Touchy pride, vanity, and boastful self-dramatization were also part of this redneck culture among people from regions of Britain where the civilization was the least developed. They boast and lack self-restraint, Olmsted said, after observing their descendants in the American antebellum South. While Professor Grady McWhiney's Cracker Culture is perhaps the most thorough historical study of the values and behavioral patterns of white Southerners, many other scholarly studies have turned up very similar patterns, even when they differed in some ways as to the causes. Professor David Hackett Fisher's Albion Seed, for example, challenges the Celtic connection thesis put forth by Professor McWhiney, but shows many of the same cultural patterns among the same people, both in Britain and in the American South. Popular writings of the 19th and 20th centuries have likewise described similar behavior, including the Indianapolis residents' comments on white Southern migrants to that city, which sounds so much like what many have said about ghetto blacks. None of this is meant to claim that these patterns have remained rigidly unchanged over the centuries, or that there are literally no differences between whites and blacks in any aspects of this subculture. However, what is remarkable is how pervasive and how close the similarities have been.
Wow. So, okay. So
Mind
that's
blowing.
interesting. I didn't know any of that. I mean, it's interesting how, you know, um, how that's how, culture develops is from sort of like copying what you're exposed to and what you kind of it's almost like a value. Like if you could imagine back in the slavery times, these people were robbed of their African culture, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And then they're gonna just kind of gravitate to what these I guess these rich plantation owners would hire these crackers or rednecks to kind of like keep them in
I mean,
line or
quite
whatever.
naturally, they're gonna learn whatever is around them. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, they were taken from over there and they lost their own culture and they probably weren't allowed to practice it anyway. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Whatever their practices were. I mean, I'm not African, I have no idea, but I'm just saying, like, it's only natural that they would have, you know, copied whatever was around them.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I guess all of these ebonics and just not only just the language and the way that people talk, but also the practices, like the violence and just everything from the games people play to the violence to the outspoken church services, the music,
Yeah.
all of that stuff is kind of inherited, and it's kind of weird, when you talk to, I know for me, like when you talk to a lot of left leaning people, they tend to think that these sort of things should be celebrated and sort of not looked down upon, but embraced. Like, hey, this is who black people are. And it's kind of ironic that it's actually not who black people are. It's actually who white people are
Yeah,
in a
specific
way.
types of so it's a subculture that came from Britain, and it's not all white people, but it's a specific group of white people.
Yeah.
That's where black people learned it from, and technically that's not our culture. But yet, like you said, the left wants us, yeah, to embrace that. And if you don't embrace it, then you're not black enough. So yeah,
Right.
and I get that a lot. Being a mixed breed and
Hmm.
mixed with white or whatever. I get that a lot from blacks and whites, really. Because I'm not black enough, like basically.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
pressure. It's like a peer pressure that you fit into this subculture where you're not good enough.
And if a white person was to be critical of black culture in the negative light, like those negative things, if you're just having a conversation to say these things are probably not good for the black community, then you're kind of
All
labeled
hell
as a
gonna
racist.
break loose.
Like, who are you to
Yeah,
say what's, yeah, you can't say that.
all hell gonna break loose. You gonna be called an Uncle Tom and everything else. You already know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My children are biracial. My my ex-wife was from Africa, and we're talking about this. And even, some of the issues that that I observed with her and her family was that, there was even some sort of tension, it seemed like, between a lot of black Americans and the African culture, because they didn't have the same culture. Like, I remember talking to, you know, um, my ex-wife's uncle, who used to say, don't bring African American people around me because I don't have anything in common with those people. Those are lowlifes. I was like, wow, that
Right.
sounds pretty harsh. And
Yeah, but
a
I've
lot
heard
of
that too from different.
Yeah, and it's just why is there a difference? And one of the things that he would always say is like, my skin is even darker than many black American skin color, and I'm African on top of it. So I have this funny accent, you know, and I'm not even from this country, and yet he's like, I happen to own my own business, I've educated my children, my family came here and they're doing great big things, in life. And it's like African Americans, they were born here and they can't seem to get out of this whole, cycle of dysfunction is what is his perception, right? And
Well, because it's not really about the color; it's about the culture. It's if we continue to embrace the culture, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. And I think that's where Thomas Sowell is coming from. He's trying to raise awareness about this subculture that basically keeps you in a low vibration. Let's face it.
mm-hmm,
It consists
mm-hmm,
of crime and all like street life.
mm-hmm,
Basically.
mm-hmm. Well, I mean, hopefully the audience can kind of chime in and leave a comment. Let me know, what are we missing here? Is this just too simplistic of a explanation of how things are? Is there something that we need to know, in addition to what Thomas Sowell is talking about? I mean, I've heard a lot of things about it goes much deeper than that. It's systematic racism at the heart of it. It's just not, it's like, yeah, it's true that, you know, um, two parent homes are more successful than a one parent home for the kids that are raised that way. That's what Thomas Sowell likes to say, and conservatives in
Top
general
down.
like to say, but there wouldn't be that situation in the first place if white people hadn't have done what they did to black people to begin with. And so it's not so easy to say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get it right. It's like white people are like if there was a race, white people started running the race, you know, hours ahead than the black people. And they're just getting started. So what do you expect? They're gonna even catch up. How are they gonna catch up? You started running hours ago. Um, that's the arguing points I hear. What do you
Right.
think? I mean, do you hear
I
that
get,
kind of
I
stuff?
get, I get, yeah, I hear that kind of stuff all the time, and I mean, I get that. White people in general are ahead of black people, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but my thing is, okay, that already happened. What are we gonna do about it? So what's not gonna get us ahead though is staying in that mentality that we just can't get ahead. And if we continue to embrace this subculture, then that's where we need to start because that's what's holding us back the most. So if you're looking up to these Democrats, right? Because I used to be a liberal, but I'm not anymore. But anyway,
What
um,
changed your mind?
what changed my mind? Oh God, a lot of things. What changed my mind was coming across different people, and I started joining different groups, and I actually initially went in those groups to try to debunk stuff, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in they basically got converted as I was trying to debunk things, and the reason
Mm.
why is because I started hearing different viewpoints, and see, when you're in the black community, almost everybody in the black community votes Democrat, and you kind of hear the same shit around you. Excuse my language. You
It's
kind of hear the
fine.
same stuff around you all the time. You know what I'm saying? It's always the same stuff, the same talking points. And so for the first time, I heard different talking points. And I started realizing, that I automatically was seeing myself as a victim because that's what we're told constantly. You're a victim. You can't make it. The white man hates you, and when you think like that, how are you going to make it? How are you going to move forward? You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't once take the culture that we're practicing that's really not our culture. So you know what I'm saying? So
Mm.
that kind of led me into doing research, reading more things and finding stuff out and stuff like that. And I just I don't know, I just stayed on that path because my life also started changing.
Mm.
I started my own business. I make earrings or whatever and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's stuff that I wasn't, I didn't even know that was available to me or that I can do that because nobody around me told me that. You know what I'm saying?
And please, if you like the content that we're, presenting here, guys, please give us a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Hit that notification bell so you know every time that we're going to be broadcasting a new show, because we're definitely going to be going in depth on some of these issues. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, this is our first show, but I wanted to mention at the outset, and I guess I need to repeat this. And I know, you're a very spiritual minded person, right? Like, I'm not a religious person. A lot of conservatives are evangelical Christians, or Muslims are very conservative people. Catholics are very conservative. I'm none of those things. Like, I'm not. This doesn't come from like a religious indoctrination or anything like that. This just comes from reasoning and rationale. I'm more of a pantheist, a naturalistic pantheist. So that's where, in the context of talking about God and spirituality, that's kind of where I'm coming from. And this is what sort of, we talked about this before, Sophia, that conservative principles tend to work cohesively with those sort of worldviews, because you're kind of similar from what I understand. You're very spiritual minded, and you see God in a
Yeah,
certain kind of way.
I consider myself a mystic, because
Yes.
I really don't take any other kind of labels like that because I feel like every religion has some truth in it, you know what I mean?
Right.
But end of the day, what my beliefs really consist of is that there's a immutable law of nature. And as long as we're aligned with that, you can't go wrong. Cause and effect type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So conservatism, to me, it's still it's still in line with my spirituality. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a Christian or anything like that, and I don't follow doctrines. But yeah, I guess, I feel like there are natural laws that you can't deny, science,
Mm-hmm.
scientific laws even, and conservatism is in line with that.
Yes, I agree. And so what we want to do is to kind of build bridges, because yeah, we've got a lot of Christians that obviously resonate with conservative values. But you can also be
Right.
an atheist, you can be an agnostic, you can
Yeah.
be a spiritual person, a Buddhist. Anybody can really get with the conservative message, because conservatism is really, for me, what really resonates the most is just the notion of responsibility and personal accountability. It seems to me that in life, if I make a bad decision, we all make bad decisions, right? If I make a bad decision, the first thing that I should do is look right into a mirror and say, what could I have done better to have a different outcome, right? And that takes a lot of inward
Right.
reflection. It's instead of
And
outwardly
that's part of
blaming.
spirituality, that inward work is that's part of this. Well, my spirituality, I don't know about your
Hmm.
spirituality, but that's a
Same.
very, very, very big thing, is to do the work within yourself, like heal your trauma. and you
Hmm.
have to take responsibility for it, you know. So conservatism is right in line with that. And like you said, I mean, it's for anybody. It's not necessarily just Christians, you know, like leftists always try to label you as a Christian nut
Hmm.
whenever you bring up any type of conservative viewpoint. So that's not true, I don't think.
Hmm. Yeah, and even it's like this. A lot of people on the left, on the far left especially, um,
Yeah, you're
they're
choppy,
all
choppy,
about,
choppy.
yeah, sorry about that. But sometimes people on the left, they can be they really resonate with science and evidence and historical facts, things like that. And so we invite anyone who, if you consider yourself a left leaning person, come on the show, get in touch with us, let's have a conversation. We're not here to really argue the point or make you look stupid. We're just here to have a conversation and make things clear, and try to have that dialogue and everything like that. And anyways, looks like Sophia's has some technical difficulties, and we're going to cut this short anyways. But look, guys, until next time, we'll let you know. Again, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and until next time, we're going to have authors. We have slated people that are really into um, this platform. So please get in touch with us. We'd love to have that conversation. Glad you could join us again, Sophia.
Sorry, I just had lost connection real quick.
Yep, that happens. I was just saying, I wanted to invite people who have opposing viewpoints to come on and let's have a discussion. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about these
Yeah, that
things
would
and
be cool.
expose. Let's let the audience decide. Let's let people know what are the talking points. Let's put the talking points and the arguments side by side, and let's see what's up. Let's see what really is going to make sense to the audience, to the people out there. So if you've got something you want to say, you want to correct us on, anything like that, we're more than happy to have that conversation, open conversation, and we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Nice show. Thomas Sowell seems like a very astute guy. What do you think?
Yeah, sorry, I can barely hear anything now.
Okay.
My apologies. My internet's, I don't know, it looks like it's okay, but apparently it's not. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just a little choppy, probably on your end, but we're just gonna go ahead and close out here. I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover, and next week we'll resume with another video reaction, and also, like I said, we're gonna have guests to come on, like authors, people who are part of the BLM movement, people that are part of the LGBTQ plus movement, and they have a lot to say. We can have a really interesting conversation. So stay tuned, guys. And until next time, um, we will
All
get
right.
up with you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.